Hello, I'm Judy Stiles. Thank you for joining us today on Newsmakers. Well, this time of year we visit with people at Missouri Southern who are retiring, and many after long careers at Southern, recognized on campus and in the community. Joining me today is the Physical Plant Director, Bob Harrington. Thank you for being here today, Bob.
Thank you, Judy. I appreciate it.
Retiring after 19 years at Southern.
Correct.
So I thought we'd talk about that today. And you're taking a different type of retirement. So when we say phase retirement, that's what your category they're falling
That is
into.
correct. Yeah, the university started a program probably 2 years ago where they're allowing people that are eligible for retirement to go ahead and take full retirement, benefits, backdrop, the entire thing, but then stay on as a part-time employee working half-time for half salary for up to 3 years afterwards to do that, if your job will allow that type of function. As it turned out, since I do all of the construction on campus as well as the physical plant, Brian Goodwin will be taking over as the physical plant director on July 1st when I retire, and my responsibilities will basically be monitoring all the construction, both internal and external on campus, dealing with architects, engineers, the contractors, all that type of thing.
Things that you've been doing all along.
Yep, absolutely. It's just been part of my job, but now it'll be the specific part, which is kind of a nice thing. It's a part of the job I truly enjoy and have for years. So,
Well, when we say physical plant, some of our viewers may not realize what that entails. So if someone says, what do you oversee? What is a physical plant?
Well, basically all the buildings on campus, the grounds, custodial services, mechanical maintenance, painters, carpenters, transportation, the warehouse and receiving, as well as I serve as the risk manager for the university. So I handle all of our liability and property insurance for the university.
So a lot of those things are really behind the scenes that make things happen and keep things running and so forth.
We kind of create the environment that everybody else lives and works in.
Right. So the students, the faculty and staff, they turn to you oftentimes when we have needs and tying that together. Well, let's backtrack a little bit about coming to Southern. 19 years you've been here. What brought you to Missouri Southern? What initially?
Well, actually I had been working for St. John's Regional Medical Center. Had been there for right at 20 years when I left. I started out as a department director of environmental services and laundry. 5 years later, I took over all of the plant operations, which is the same as our physical plant here. 2 years after that, I was an assistant vice president. 2 years after that, I was a vice president. And then in 1998, Catholic Health Initiatives bought out the Sisters of Mercy at St. John's. CHI was the largest Catholic health corporation in the country, and they took the Sisters of Mercy Hospital and turned it into a corporate type hospital. And they actually came in October of '98 one day and walked in and fired the president and CEO. 2 weeks later they came back in. They had instituted an interim CEO. 2 weeks later he fired the entire administrative staff, all the vice presidents. They just called us in and said it's been fun by, and they brought in their own staff. Yeah, I always figured I'd retire from St. John's. I'd been there for so long, and like I said, I'd gone from a department director to vice president and had a very successful career, was responsible for a lot of the construction on campus there, and really enjoyed it. But I left there, and as it turned out, they happened to have saw an ad in the paper one day for Missouri Southern, and sent my resume in. And about a week later, I got a call from John Teedy, who was the executive vice president at the time. And John and I had served together on multiple committees around the city, and I had taken several classes from him. My original degree is in secondary education as a history major, and I wanted to get an MBA, so I came out here and got a degree from Southern, taking all the business core classes, and took several classes from Dr. Teedy. So when he saw my resume, he called me up on that Monday he got back from vacation. He said, "Are you serious?" And I said, "Yeah, I'd love it." And he said, "Meet me for lunch tomorrow." We met for lunch, and he hired me at lunch, and then I had to come out. At that point, Dr. Agee was the HR director, and I came out to introduce myself and said, "Hi, I'm Bob Harrington. I just got hired," and you probably want to know about that. So that's kind of how I got to Southern.
Right. And of course, 19 years ago, Southern looked different than it does today.
Absolutely, totally different. We've added, I figured out a couple weeks ago that in the 19 years that I've been here, I've been responsible for right at $140 million worth of new construction on campus. My first project was finishing Leggett and Platt, and then we did the remodel of the library and the addition of the library. And then we did the second floor on the Student Life Center to create the cafeteria, and then we did East Hall, and then trying to think where we went from there. We did all the construction when we got ready to do the BSC in the rec center. We had to move, if you recall, we had to move everybody around.
Right,
And
shift people out.
we
So you
had
could
to empty the learning center out so that I could move the bookstore into the learning center while we did BSC. So we did all the construction basically in Kuhn Hall to move people around, and then the Anderson Justice Center to move nursing services all around to get them out, and then moved seemed like everybody on campus at least once to get to where we were at. And then we did BSC in the rec center. At the same time, we were doing construction on the health science building at that point. The rec center and BSC finished out about a year ahead of the health science building. Then we moved nursing out and remodeled that area again to move people around back in Justice Center. And then we did after we moved nursing out of Hummel, we remodeled that whole area and put into anatomy and physiology labs, a human physiology lab, the cadaver lab, and a couple classrooms for biology. In fact, last summer just remodeled that area again to expand, basically double the size of the cadaver lab for it, because that's been a real valuable tool for the university to have, especially with the new medical school coming on in town. So it's been basically doing construction one after the other, and then we just built the quads and finished that out 2 years ago. We're now currently working on Reynolds Hall, did the third floor and first floor of Reynolds. Now we're doing Nixon Hall, which will be about a 22,000 square foot addition on the south side of Reynolds Hall. And working with the architects to design a new football stadium to replace the stadium that was built in '72 and is totally outdated, there's no doubt about it. And we were actually looking at a residence hall at the same time, but we've kind of put that on hold for right now. With the not sure where the governor's going to go and where the legislature's going to go with the withholding and how much we're going to get on our allocation this year. We've kind of put that on hold till we find out exactly where all that's going to go.
Well, was that something that attracted you to Southern, the fact that you was looking to the future with all these, maybe when you first came on board you didn't know all these projects were going to happen, but as far as growth?
Well, actually, when I left St. John's, I had resumes out all over the country. I had multiple job offers in big cities. And I sat down with my wife at one point. I guess came back from an interview in Detroit, and I sat down with Crystal and I said, you know, we're happier in Joplin than we've ever been. At that time, Crystal was the manager for economic development for the Chamber of Commerce. My oldest daughter, Cameo, was the first house manager at the Ronald McDonald House. I had been on the founding board when we built the Ronald House. My youngest daughter was going to school in Springfield, and we pretty well decided we don't want to leave Joplin. We really like the community. We were both very active in the community. This was home to us, and so we decided to stay. So I started looking for a job here, and this one kind of turned up. I live 2 blocks from the campus, so it's about as convenient as it could be. And it's doing the same thing I've done for my entire career. This is actually the 6th university that I've been responsible for. And I've also done 2 hospitals and 2 hotels. So in 44 years, I've done this same thing over a lot of different institutions.
In Missouri Southern, we've always heard, you know, there's a master plan. People might be curious, you know, you mentioned upcoming projects, but is there a place where you can pull out, here's our dream, our master plan, what we'd like to have?
Yeah, actually, we developed an entire campus master plan in 2012. We worked with the architectural firm of RDG out of Des Moines, Iowa, and got a lot of the students and faculty and the user groups involved on what is our dream, what was our plan, you know, and you don't always follow the master plan explicitly, but at least gives you a direction of which way you're going. You know, and as an example, one of the things that came out of the master planning was when we talked to the student groups, a lot of the comment that came out was, there's no icon on campus where when I graduate, I can go have my picture taken with this icon. And that's when we designed and developed the Lion Pride Plaza with the big bronze lion statue out there. We created that icon, and that was part of the master plan. That was one of the things that came out that was very important to us to do. The master plan called for additional student housing, which we did with the quads. You know, as we've developed those things. At that point, it accounted for the health science building being completed and moving some of those services around, which we have done. So the plan is in existence. It's a good plan. It talks a lot about utilization on the campus, what spaces we have available to work with, and some of those types of items. And it's been very, very helpful for us to follow. But like I said, you don't follow it exactly. as an example, we didn't put the new residence hall where they recommended we did, because when we started looking at it, some of the stormwater runoff issues that we would have had to address to put it, because it was basically, they proposed the first one that would go in that big and open area in front of the Student Life Center.
That kind of low-lying area.
And the cost of taking care of all the stormwater to be able to build a residence hall there would just added so much cost to it that we found a better location for it when we built the quad.
So being adaptable when you're anything you've built, you know, that you have a dream, but then you say, what can we do it financially, obviously, but what can we adapt to fit the needs of the space, and tying that together.
You know, and it's always a budget issue, because you'd like to think that you be able to sit down and define the program of what you want in a facility, sit down with the architect and design that facility to match the program of exactly what you need, and then set the budget for what that program's going to cost and what that facility's going to cost. Right. But it never works out that way, because the legislature or whatever never gives you enough money to do that. So you set your program, and then you have to start cutting that program back because of the budget to get it to where you need to be. You know, a prime example, when we designed the quads, we had a total project budget of $14 million to build the quads.
Right.
First time I bid it out, it came in at $3 million over budget. And we ended up having to do what's called value engineering, where you sit down and look at the entire project and figure out where can we make changes that won't affect the function of the buildings, but will allow us to get it into budget. And you know, one of the things that we did is the original design had buildings D and E, which are the two right on the end. They were actually down at the same level as the entrance to the tunnel. And then there was a grand staircase that came up into another big patio area in front of the rest of the buildings. Well, by lifting those back up, we saved a lot of earthwork, actually a lot of the sewer, storm and sanitary sewer work, and some costs like that we were able to save by raising those buildings up instead of doing that. Would it have been more attractive the other way? Probably, but it's very functional the way it is. Right. But that's what we had to do to get it back into our budget where we could build it. And obviously we did well. The students rented it out in 45 minutes as soon as they opened. It was 201 beds, and as soon as they opened the beds up for rent, they went out in 45 minutes. So. And
they continue to use
that.
They
do. We still have I think there's about a 200-person waiting list to get into the quads at this point, which is one of the driving forces for looking at building a new residence hall.
So there's that supply and demand question of students wanting to live on campus. The university is aware that more students would like to live here on campus, and tying all that together. And then you have the academic areas. You mentioned the health science building. That one was a number of years in the dreams and planning, and even I think the location maybe originally had been somewhere else, and now it's where it's at.
Our previous president had decided that building, when it was built, it was actually designed probably in 99, 2000.
So it's a long time in the works.
And it just before the funding was available to build it. And Dr. Leone was always adamant that it was going to sit on the hill right in front of Young Gymnasium, just to the east side of Hearns Hall. And it was always because he wanted to be able to see it out of his window. And although all of us questioned and argued with him that that's probably not the right location, because that's probably the most congested intersection on campus, and to put a building that size in that location, you're just going to compound everything that we're dealing with, people, vehicles, the whole ball of wax. And as it turned out, when he resigned on a Friday, on Monday, Dr. Agee was the interim president at that point, and we moved the building to where it is now.
We've got a parking lot here, we can build it on that parking lot.
We moved it, and it actually was a perfect location for it. It's worked out very well. And that building's kind of unique. I had a real advantage having worked at the hospital as long as I had, that when we designed the nurse training areas, the 2 respiratory labs, and even the sim lab in that building, they were designed to match exactly what was in Freeman and St. John's at the time. So we used Hill-Rom finishes, Hill-Rom head walls with all the med gases and everything, just like our student nurses would see when they went to do their practicals at the hospitals. And it worked out very well for us. As you recall, right after the tornado, that building became a hospital for 28-bed hospital for the first week after the tornado.
And of course, mentioning the tornado, that point in your career, obviously that put a lot of stress on your department, overwhelming, but you were able to handle that when you said, here's this problem, how are we going to reach solutions?
It was a neat experience. One of those experiences you wouldn't trade for anything, but I'd just soon never do it again. We had, as you recall, we turned Leggett and Platt into a Red Cross shelter.
Right.
We'd signed the agreement with Red Cross probably 3 weeks before the tornado, and we're all thinking about the New Madrid Fault, and at some point that earthquake's going to happen, and all those people from
They're going to come to
St.
Joplin,
Louis
yeah.
is going to come this way. You know, none of us ever anticipated that within 3 weeks we'd be working with what we did after the tornado. But it was kind of neat because none of my staff had been trained yet from Red Cross on how to set up a shelter. So we did what we thought was best, and then when Red Cross got here, they liked what we had done, so they just kind of augmented it. But we did things a little bit different than what Red Cross had done. As an example, Red Cross never allowed people into their shelter with their pets. So if somebody showed up with their dog,
Right.
and that's all they had left after the tornado, they would separate them. They'd make the dog go to the pound. They, you know, they had a
Go
humane
to animal
society
shelter.
somewhere, and then the people could go into the shelter. Well, we took all the racquetball courts on the bottom level of the young gym, covered the floors, and we used that whole area as a shelter for people with pets. And then the other people were upstairs in Leggett and Platt. We fenced off an area where they could take their dogs out and walk them and stuff like that. And actually Red Cross has changed their policy since that time, that they now do the same thing when they set up a shelter. They realized how important it was for those people that have lost everything and have their pet and all of a sudden show up. But yeah, I can honestly say I was never more proud of our community, the university, and specifically my staff, because I never once, through all of that we went through with, I can't even tell you how many donations we had to deal with constantly coming in. Plus, we had every organization, I think, in the state here at some point in time. The president
We
was
were the
here.
headquarters for the
We were
Joplin
the headquarters
relief.
virtually everything had happened. We lucked out. We weren't in the tornado zone, and we never lost power. So we kind of became the center of everything else that happened. The first responders, we had them in 12-hour shifts in all of our residence halls because they were empty at the time.
Right, summertime.
We rotated them every 12 hours for the first 2 weeks after the tornado to do that. So it was quite an experience.
Your crew stepped forward and helped out. And
They did a fabulous job. Like I said, I can never be more proud of them. I never once had anybody say, no, that's not my job, or no, I can't stay and work extra hours, whatever. The question was always, what do we need to do and where do we go to do it, and took care of it.
a lot of people may not realize, when we have those situations, your staff that work on the grounds and everything, like in the wintertime, the snow comes, we turn on the TV and they say Missouri Southern campus is closed. Your staff is here getting it ready.
We're all here cleaning off the campus. And so many people don't realize how many miles of sidewalks we've got to clean to get ready for everybody to come back to work. And as hard as we try, you can never get it all. It's impossible with a campus the size of ours to get it all. But we do a pretty good job. I think the staff does a very hard job. They work very hard to try to make it as very safe as possible for our faculty, students, and staff.
To get it back for the students to be able to return, and tying all that together. Well, when you look at your accomplishments, a lot of the buildings and things that you've accomplished, you've dealt with a lot of different people, with the designers, the contractors, and a lot of people work involved as well in your job. You find.
Yeah, absolutely. I've worked with, I'm trying to think, probably 6 or 8 different architectural firms since I've been here. At least that many contractors that we've had to work through. By state regulation, when we have a project, we have to actually go out and select the architects based on qualifications. Unlike a private organization that can find somebody they like and just agree on a payment, the way we have to do it, we have to put out a request for qualifications, and all the architectural firms or engineering firms we're going to deal with provide us their qualifications and their experiences. We actually have to select the architect we want to work with from those qualifications and experiences before we can ever talk about money. And then once you have the one selected that you want to work with, then you can start asking them about the fees and what it's going to cost to do that. And if you can't come to an agreement with them, then you can go to the next firm in line. But you basically have to rank them by qualifications as opposed to pricing or any other issue. So it makes it really interesting. Typically what we'll do, it's not unusual for us to get 20 responses back from requests for qualifications. There's usually a committee involved. I'll pass the statements of qualifications out to the committee. We'll set up a ranking system and go through and rank those. Typically we'll select the top 3 that we like the best. We'll bring those in for personal interviews. And what I stress to the committee at that point is, okay, what I require of the architects when they come for that presentation is that they bring the people that they're actually going to have to do the project.
So you meet them.
And so you meet them. And the thing that I stress to the committee, because most of them don't do this all the time, is the one thing you really want to focus on is personality. Do you like these people? Can you work with them? Can we challenge them? Do we feel comfortable that they're going to challenge us when we come up with a dumb idea of something we want to do? That is there a tactful way to say, no, you really don't want to do it that way. You might want to look at this type thing. And it is really important because you spend a lot of time with these people when you're going through the design process and the construction process. And it's got to be people that you like and that you feel very comfortable with. And I have to admit, I think I've established some very, very good working relationships and friendships with the people that I've worked with.
And working with the people outside of campus and working with people inside, sometimes innovative ideas where I'm thinking of the trailers, for instance. When you were working on Reynolds Hall, you had to have a place to still have classes.
Correct.
So a different approach was, well, we have these trailers we can use.
Well, we found, that was kind of a unique thing because when we found the trailers, FEMA had actually donated them or given them to SEMA. And we saw them on their website, and the first time we contacted them is when the governor was looking ready to do the bond issue that was going to give us the money for Reynolds. And our biggest concern all along had been, it's real easy to move a math class. I mean, as long as they have whiteboards all the way around and a projector, they're good.
They can sit there and do the work.
A lab's a whole different animal to try to deal with. And these trailers that were available were the ones that the high school used when they set up their campus at the mall after the tornado, and they were already set up as laboratories. And when we first saw them, we contacted the people, and they said, yeah, we'll sell you those for $57,500. And it's like, that's not bad. Okay, there's 15 trailers in the deal. That's a pretty good deal. So it was about 2 weeks later, Ron Richard had called and said, okay, it looks like the bond issue really is going to go this time. We contacted them again, and they said, okay, we'll sell you those trailers for $17,500. And it's like, okay, that's much better than 2 weeks ago. So we let it go at that point. And then actually when the governor signed it, Ron Richard called back and said, okay, that they've signed the governor has signed the bond issue, the money's going to be available. We contacted again, and the guy said, okay, I'll sell them to you for 1% of the original purchase price, which was $9,800. So we bought all 15 trailers for $9,800. And then I was negotiating with the place where they were stored to store them until we were ready for them. I got a call a week later from the FEMA office in Kansas City, and they said, we understand you bought the trailer. I said, yes, we're very, definitely want them. Said, if you'll take them right now, we'll move them for you for free. We said, absolutely, bring them down. So we put them on that parking lot back behind the physical plant, and then we poured all the piers to set them on and everything and put them all together. And we actually got that entire complex that we were able to move all the physics and chemistry down there during that process. Cost us less than $100,000 to do that entire thing, and there's no way in the world we could have built any kind of facility that large with that much space and that much equipment for anywhere near that kind of price that fast.
And of course, you're dealing with a timetable of academic years and semesters.
Correct.
So there are professors who say, I'd like to have my class in a new building by a certain time, and departments that need
and we actually started that project in the summer. And we actually moved chemistry and physics down there during the Christmas break. So they started down there, and we immediately started demolition on the 3rd floor of Reynolds. And then it was actually a year later we moved chemistry and everything off the 1st floor up to the 3rd floor, moved all the biology down to the trailers at that point, and started on the 1st floor to remodel the 1st floor, and then moved them back the following Christmas. So it worked out very well.
Timing fell right in place. It must be rewarding then when you see those students and the faculty using those new facilities.
Oh yeah, it's especially like the student study areas that we put into Reynolds that were kind of unique on campus, and to see all the kids in there writing all over the glass walls and all the whiteboards and stuff in there and working on problems, it's really very rewarding to see that. It's really kind of neat.
So as you've built for the future, continue to build, as you mentioned, Nixon Hall and so forth, there's a lot of possibilities of technology coming into all these buildings and everything tying together.
We try to make sure that we have a consultant that, especially in IT and AV, because that's an industry that's changing almost hourly. And you've got to have somebody that can come on campus, and we have an outstanding IT staff. I mean, Al and his guys are fantastic. But I've got to have somebody that can sit down at the table with them and talk geek, because that's what they talk. And you got to be able to make sure that we go room by room to make sure that we've got all the components in the rooms, from data drops to HDMI cables to projectors to, you know, smart boards if that's what they're using.
Lots
or
of little
screens,
details.
A lot of that kind of stuff. And if we don't have that, it really impacts how they try to present their classes and how they try to teach. So I make it a point of making sure that I get a consultant that is very, very specific in that area to work with Al and his staff.
Right.
So that we get that part of it correct when we do the buildings. And it's one of the hardest parts to do because, like I said, it's changing so rapidly, and you're always trying to build in, you know, an extra conduit here and there so that when the technology changes, you at least have a pathway to get the wires from point A to point B to be able to accomplish that.
So it's not outdated when it's finished.
Exactly, yeah.
Tying that together. Well, as you head toward phase retirement, what will you miss most about being full-time out here?
Probably the people. I've made some phenomenal friends out here. It's been a fabulous place to work. I have very, very much enjoyed working at Southern. I said in the 35, 37 years I've lived in Joplin, I've had the privilege of working for two of the most prestigious institutions in this town with St. John's Regional Medical Center and Missouri Southern. So it's been very, very rewarding for me.
What words of advice would you leave with someone who's continuing to work here, if you were to?
Stay positive. The budgeting and the finances are a real challenge for us right now. We have a governor that evidently doesn't appreciate higher education, or he doesn't appear to with the way he's adjusting the budgets, and it makes it very difficult to maintain the facility and the staff to create the environment that we want for our students. And like I said, I'm very proud of my staff because I think they go out of their way to really do everything they can to create the right environment, to keep the buildings clean and functioning as best we can. We've got a lot of old facilities and old equipment that takes a great deal of maintenance to keep it operating and operating effectively. So I think probably just stay real positive and don't let the finances get us down. We'll go through it. We'll get through it. Dr. Marble and Rob Eust and the group, I think, are very innovative with the things that they're looking at to try to help us, and they are very much looking at ways to make it the best for us.
Well, Bob, I'd like to thank you for your years of service here at Missouri Southern and wish you the best in phase retirement as well. It's coming up the next 3 years.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome, and thank you for visiting with us today. And I'd like to thank you, the viewers, for joining us this week on Newsmakers. I'm Judy Stiles. Hope you can join me again next week at the same time on the station. We'll see you then.